welcome in my session called Application Insights Inside Out. My name is Peter Detender. I'm a Microsoft Technical Trainer at Microsoft Redmond, and I'm going to walk you through the beauty of Application Insights, one of my favorite Azure services. Now to start with a little bit about myself, so you already know my name, Peter Detender, originally from Belgium, but moved to Redmond a bit more than 2 years ago to continue my role as a technical trainer for Microsoft, mainly providing training to our top partners and customers all over the globe, where my courses are typically developing Azure Solutions AZ204, Azure DevOps, and GitHub, so the Azure 400, and custom workshops on application migration. I've been in the business for about 27 years. Actually started as technical engineer building physical data centers, and gradually over the years moved all the way to the other cycle of the data center, 100% in cloud, and even touching a little bit on AI nowadays. In a little bit of free time that I have, I like to share my knowledge with communities, creating conference sessions like this one, I would say, writing technical blogs, and every now and then I'm helping authors. So in a little bit of free time that I have, I'm still going back to Azure technologies, where I'm keeping myself busy writing blogs, testing new demos, speaking at conferences like this one, in person or virtual, obviously. And you can see I also had a past in writing technical books, where it's been on hold for about 2 years now because of the relocation, but hoping to pick it up anytime soon. Now my topic is Application Insights. Now obviously I need to start with a little bit of an introduction, like what is Application Insights about? Now before I can talk about Application Insights, I need to focus a bit more on why do we need Application Insights, or like what is the question that it actually answers. And that brings me to this one here. It's all about monitoring your environment and diagnosing modern applications. Because what we see is that an application today is based on a multitude of components. Next to that, it's based on multiple tiers, where you might have a hybrid application running partly on-prem, connecting to cloud. Even within cloud, it's probably based on multiple components. You got a web app, you got a middle tier, you got databases, you got maybe Azure Functions, you got containers. And why not, you got all of that combined. Maybe your application is running across multiple data centers to optimize high availability and performance. And then from the client perspective, it also brings in some challenges, because customers are connecting to your application using different operating systems, different browsers, and maybe even from mobile apps. Next to that, you also need to think about your developers. You need to think about your DevOps team, and you need to think about how they're going to publish applications. And you want to get a view on all that. Because nowadays, publishing an app into hybrid cloud or on-prem, it probably is based on CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration, continuous deployment, which means that now, whenever my developer or my DevOps team is checking in code into source control, we're going to move that into a build environment, testing the application, compiling it, validating it, and then eventually we're going to move it into a running state, which can be dev and test, staging, production, canary, early adopter, general availability, maybe blue-green deployments, and I'm pretty sure you find additional information on that. If you should have any questions, don't hesitate reaching out. And then ultimately, for any issue you have, you want to find a quick solution, meaning the better our applications are getting published, the better we have the monitoring view, normally the better they should run as well. Now, I told you it's all about monitoring. Now, one of the starting points here is, I would say, a conceptual view on Azure Monitor, the overall monitoring capability, the resource service in our platform. Now, when you look at the topology, it starts with your Azure tenant. Now, what this means is that Azure Monitor allows you to monitor anything that's running as a service in your Azure environment, but it's tenant-based. So it means one single tenant for Azure Monitor. By the way, I'm not really going to talk about it a lot. And if you have any multi-tenancy scenarios, you might look into Azure Lighthouse, which is originally a process application that we provided for partners customer environments. But in the meantime, larger enterprise customers are also using it within their internal environment. Within the tenant, you have at least one Azure subscription, but nothing blocks you from monitoring multiple Azure subscriptions. And that's what you find over here. Anything you deploy in your Azure subscriptions can be monitored. So all Azure resources are supported inside Azure Monitor. You can start with monitoring the operation system for Windows and Linux, meaning if you run it as a web application, like an application server, you're going to install some components out of Azure Monitor, installing the Azure Monitor agent, and from there you're going to manage and monitor your operating system. If you have syslogging on Linux, it's exactly the same thing. If you're using Windows platform, think of Performance Monitor, think of Event Viewer, think of Task Manager, where it's going to allow you to monitor the same components, the same telemetry information actually from that operating system using Azure Monitor. And then moving eventually up to the application stack, which means that if your application or resource component in Azure is not running on top of a virtual machine, but it's like a containers, it's an web application, web application, or it's like functions or databases, you still can monitor it, but obviously the parameters, the telemetry information will be slightly different. And then already mentioned custom sources, but what this means is that it allows you to bring in other telemetry information from on-prem or hybrid environments, where it's typically again relying on an agent. Now within monitoring, you typically see three cycles. You have metrics, and that's what I describe as real-time or near real-time information, and you have logs, typically the longer retention. And then to be complete, you also have tracing, where traces is technically allowing you to validate, like this is my starting point, probably starting from some sort of a baseline, and then moving it up into the actual behavior, like what is my overall performance, what is the uptime, why do I see any failures, and whatnot. And then on the right hand side, just a couple of, I would say, categories or feature sets, if you want, within Azure Monitor, where the first one is Insights. Now I'll use Application Insights, but know that a lot of the concept of Application Insights is also brought into other monitoring insight capabilities in the Azure platform. If you want to get a pretty detailed view on your container running times, like a Azure Kubernetes service, you could use Container Insights or Virtual Machine Insights, or even adding some custom monitoring solutions for like backup disaster recovery. That's the idea. Monitoring is one thing, but how do you actually monitor it, right? That's where the representation, the visualization, you could say, is becoming important. That's where you could start from the built-in Azure portal, which on its own could be seen as a dashboard. You can customize the views, and if you want, you can port information from Azure Monitor into, for example, Power BI. Now, the biggest reason why we do monitoring is obviously knowing what's going on with our environment. That's where we're going to rely on analysis, and primarily I would recommend you to look more into log analytics. Now, a little teaser there, Application Insights is 100% based on data that you're going to store in log analytics. And then the reactive piece comes in, where it means that you're not just going to watch over, like, oh my god, my portal starts to look a little bit more red than green, like meaning some failures, not everything is running as healthy, but you also want to take an action. So that's where you could rely on other parts of the Azure platform outside of Azure Monitor, using, for example, Azure Alerts to send you notifications, like good, bad, maybe there's a warning. And you could also integrate with, for example, DevOps pipelines to automate certain processes. You could use like auto-scaling for app services, and you could use a scale set for your virtual machines. And then last, just to close this diagram here, you also have integration with other platforms. If you're exporting information from Azure Monitor into Splunk, into New Relic, or any other tool, know that you can do that. Or even back to the reactive and sometimes proactive as well, where you're going to integrate with, for example, Logic's, our no-code workflow scenario. So that's just giving you like a quick high-level overview of what the Azure Monitor topology is about. Now, to give you some idea about the capabilities of our Azure Log Analytics and Application Insights and Azure Monitor, but primarily Application Insights, I thought about coming up with a sample demo application to somewhat make it, I would say, a little bit more complex than just a Hello World web application and seeing some metrics, right? So in short, the application I'm using, by the way, there's a link here. Oops, there's a link here where you can install this application into your own environment. It's based on, as you can see, it's using Azure storage accounts, primarily using functions, Azure Key Vault to store secrets, in the middle event grid, and storing some data in Cosmos database. It's a sample application that represents like a full boot automated parking lot or express lane scenario, where you're going to start from grabbing car license plate images, moving them into Azure storage. Azure storage gets triggered by event grid to send them off using an Azure function to cognitive service. And once the feedback from the Azure AI cognitive service comes back, we're going to store the license plate information from the car into the Cosmos database, and eventually sending an email message for like invoicing, or just to notify the customer, like, yeah, you're good to go, you can cross the bridge, or you can get through the channel, or anything else like that. So let me switch to that little demo app. So to generate some traffic here, literally, because we're talking about a full boot scenario, I'm going to click that button, and from there it's going to start up some traffic. So to kick off my process, I'm going to start my simulated car traffic, and each and every number is like a car passing through my express lanes or passing through my toll booth. Now from here, if we want to monitor, we go into the different building blocks in Azure. So I could go to my functions, or let's start with our storage account, right, where I do have my images coming in. So we can go into our containers, go into our images, and inside you can see, like right on the spot here, like live traffic, we got some car images getting generated. And if you are interested in validating that there is indeed a car getting through my toll booth, I can actually show you that the information is there. There we go. The next part in our application was OCR. Now it's just running an API call, so nothing to show you from within the Azure portal. From there we had some final data coming into our Cosmos database. So we open up our Cosmos DB, and from there we can again use our data explorer and looking into the scenario. Like, do we actually have data coming in into our database? For now, if everything works out fine, my functions are running, and you can see here that we do have that license plate information coming back from the different cars. So that's the scenario. Now, from a monitoring perspective, we could go into each and every of those Azure building blocks and use the monitoring section over here. Now it's a little bit dynamic, I would say, in a way that it's showing you specific telemetry information for the nature of the service. So in this case, I'm in my Cosmos database, which means if I go into metrics, it's going to show me over here specific metrics relevant to my Cosmos database based on performance or anything else. For now, if I switch back to my storage account, let me take a step back. Maybe it's faster to just go back and select it, right? Back into my storage. For now, if I go back to my monitoring section, over here, it almost looks the exact same thing as before, but this time the metrics I'm going to see here are specific for storage. So that brings in the challenge like how do I get a view on my full topology. I talked a little bit about alerts, so for each and every of these sections we do have alerts, and by the way, if I would look into my web application, it's the one over here. I can go into the monitoring section and I can see some statistics about the behavior of my app. I can scroll down here on the site, and once more I got my monitor. So one point that would help you in centralizing this sort of information is not looking into monitoring from each and every service or resource, but directly going into monitoring. For now, and that's what I talked about, we have application insights, container insights, virtual machine insights. We have metrics, we have alerts. So think of Azure Monitor as a centralized service entry point to monitor all the different building blocks. And on top of that, using the different components related to monitoring your application workloads. Now from here, we're going to spice it up a little bit and talking about application insights. Now we have our monitoring standalone for each and every resource, each and every service. We can get a broader view using Azure Monitor, but there's still a few pieces missing. It's not really answering questions. Now, what is the core idea about application insights? It's going to help you watching over your application workload availability. I'm using an Azure workload, but again, this works for hybrid applications and running on-prem in virtual machines as well. So one core scenario, why would you monitor your environment, is getting a view on application availability. What about my performance? Is it running healthy? Is it running reliable? And maybe even more important, what about my usage? My application is running. Is it performing okay? Do I need to move up to larger VM sizes? Do I need to change my app service plans? Do I need to switch my Azure function plans and whatnot? Those are typically the questions. Or to give you some idea about other questions, like what happens if my application is crashing? Is it running fine, yes or no? And even more important, if it's not running fine, how can I figure out the root cause? Why it was not running anymore? What happened? What is my root cause? Why is it working fine in a specific Azure region but not in another? Why is my application running fine like on a Monday between 2 and 4, but it's not really running fine outside of that time frame? What about my functions? What about the responsiveness of my applications? What are, on top of that, what are my dependencies? Again, is my application availability okay? Is it up and down? And again, once more, what is the root cause? Typical questions that your operations teams, platform engineering teams, or site reliability teams are concerned of. And most probably, you're going to rely on your developers as well, because at some point in time, like making an API call, it's not always something that an operations team can validate, or at least figuring out why it's not always working as it should be. So that brings me to Application Insights. Now in short, how does it work? Application Insights gets deployed in an Azure environment. You deploy the resource, you enable the services, you could say, and from there, you're going to integrate it directly in Azure running workloads, being app services or functions, or installing an agent inside a virtual machine. Which also means that you could run it hybrid, an on-prem environment, or running your applications outside of Azure, outside of on-prem, meaning in some other hosting environment. Application Insight is all based on telemetry information. You can monitor telemetry information from within the application using App Insights SDK, or you could also capture client information. That's primarily what I'm going to use in my demo example. Telemetry information gets sent into Application Insights, and there is a little bit of security using an instrumentation key. And then eventually you're going to open up Application Insights to start monitoring your environment, but up to a lot more granular level than what I already showed you in Azure Monitor. Once the telemetry information comes in, you're going to start using it as a full APM application performance management scenario. So what it allows you to do is detecting the problem, like using proactive alerts, using customized but also available out-of-the-box dashboards, and live metric information. So you can diagnose your environment during any problems, or even going back in time to figure out why did we have an issue last week, but we didn't have anyone available to really look into it, but you're not losing the data. Another challenge you have with monitoring is filtering the noise. So that's where App Insights is going to allow you to triage and using like real user impact and using application maps, but I'll talk about the details later on. The diagnostics is, if you ask me, one of the most important features of Application Insights. Monitoring is one thing, but helping you to diagnose what's going on and getting that some sort of a trend analysis based on a baseline, that I think is super powerful. And then last is just integrating it as a default standard go-to operational component. You're going to build alerts, you're going to use reactive and proactive notifications on metrics, on traces, on logs, and overall generating the data. So that, before jumping into some other details on App Insights, let me show you a little bit what it looks like out of the box. So I'm switching back to my Azure environment. And just to generate some more live traffic, let's spin up our counter again. And it's going to generate some more car information. Now from here, I go into Application Insights. Application Insights is deployed for my application workload, and I can get live metric information. Now everything I'm showing you is the default, totally not customized dashboarding view. So to give you an idea, the core of my application, if you think about my diagram, is running functions. Now I'm going to freeze my screen to walk you through some of these components. Right? So we can see incoming requests, we can see the outgoing request from one function to the other, or the function call is waiting for a response, that's what it means. We can get a view on call failures, obviously simulated. It's not that my Azure building blocks are not running healthy, but if it's all running healthy, I don't have to show you anything, right? And then down here is technically called servers, but what we're doing is highlighting the Azure functions here. Now again, I'm using functions, but there's a web app, there's Cosmos database, and everything else on the site. I can look into telemetry information. Now it has a little bit of a misleading name, I would say here, called sample telemetry, but it is actually the live telemetry information. So if I go back a little bit, you can see that some of this data had a red flag next to it. So I can open up one of these items, and if I scroll down here, it's going to show me exactly what's going on with my scenario. So I can highlight the day and time. I can see like this function call in this case, by the way, it's processing my image, and a little bit later it's calling another processing image. And I can see a little bit on top that it's executing the actual safe plate data, which is a second function in our architecture. We can look into logging information, and we can validate the HTTP call information as well. So again, this is all coming out of the box. Now from here, you're going to start analyzing. You're going to figure out like what's going on with my environment. I can change this now. Since I went to live metrics, it's only giving me like an almost real-time view. From here, I can look into availability. And again, this is all based on default out-of-the-box dashboarding, but nothing blocks you from customizing. Now, I gotta be honest, my application is typically not running long enough to give me a view on availability, but what it allows you to do here is, for example, changing the time frame. And it will show you some statistics about your application uptime. You can add high availability testing. I wouldn't focus too much on classic, but now you could add a standard test. For now, the test is going to involve connecting to a URL. So this could be availability test. You connect to the URL, which by the way can be the internal something.azurewebsites.net, but it could also be the public one. If there's like a firewall in between or a load balancer, allowing you to test the availability of your application from the inside of the network as well as on the public side. Integrating some certificate information and defining how long you want to run the test. And then basically it's just going to perform a sequence of HTTP GET requests during the time frame that you specify. Now imagine that something is wrong with our application. It could be a total failure, it could be performance impact. Without doing much, we just move from availability to failures and to performance. Cool. Let's have a look at our potential failures. As you can see, I generated about 2,000 car motions just to spin up some live data in the last 24 hours. And I can see that there's 3 issues. I can immediately detect that the main problem is coming from my process image function call. I can hoover up to my response codes. I'm going to select this and it's going to show me exactly based on the client type is not the browser, the backend process, right? We can see that the process image has some problems. I'm going to select this individual item and now it's going to build me this topology tracing diagram, and it allows my operations team but also my developer team to immediately pinpoint the root cause. Now, if you think back about my application flow, it was a sequence of functions interacting with a storage account, with a Cosmos database, and sending information into cognitive service. Now, even if you don't know that much about my application workload, you can see that here we start with a process image. My process image interacts with my block. It's going to connect to my data lake, opening some information, getting the properties of the block, like picking up the file, you could say, and eventually having the file. And from there, it's going to send it to cognitive service. That's what that process image function is doing. Now I can see that from here, everything is okay. And the alert, the problem, the exception here only starts at the end of the cycle. I can also see like, well, this total function call takes 83 milliseconds and everything was working fine, and eventually we can see that over here at the end of the cycle, again, there is a problem. We can perform tracing. What are you allowed, what are you able to do out of the tracing? You can enable tracing. There's a whole bunch of filtering you can do, and it's going to show you like the raw information about your telemetry information. What's the severity level? What are the headers that my application was using and whatnot? All that tracing information is now moved here to the side, and we get the full call stack, similar to what a developer would see from their local development environment during debugging mode. And that's available here, and it's also going to highlight some other pieces of information. And again, this is all out of the box behavior. Now, the magic behind the scenes is coming from log analytics. Now, what is log analytics? It's where you're going to run specific queries. So technically, what happens when you deploy Application Insights, it's going to require you to install what we call an Azure Log Analytics workspace. Think of it as a data collector. From there, we capture all telemetry information. It's getting stored in Log Analytics, and Application Insights is running on top of that. This is just a sample query where it's pulling up information based on a certain time frame, like the start and end date. We're going to look for processing information data requests where it's not coming from the browser, so it's really the backend function called process in my sample application workload, and we're going to run some item counts. And that's what you can see here, but I would say although the information is obviously valuable, it's less interesting to look at this kind of dashboard than what I showed you in my application insights. Let me take one step back here. And jumping back to my application insights, where now we can also get a view on performance. The logic, the philosophy behind it is exactly the same as what I showed you for availability and what I just talked about in failures. So we have our two prime main functions, the process image, and once it's coming back from OCR, Azure AI, we're going to send it off to Cosmos database. It's going to allow me to get more insight. What are the results? What is the uptime? From where are customers connecting? Or in this case, where is my workload running? That's the idea. I can get a view on a specific request count to maybe identify, are there any more busy times during the day where maybe I need to switch to a different application plan. And again, here on top, if I move around, you can see that are actually based on log analytics queries, but now getting a pretty cool representation. So that was, I would say, a big part of my demo scenario. So let's switch back to a couple of slides and moving on with our story. So important, what I showed you already is the querying. So again, we have application insights. Underneath, we got Azure Log Analytics, our data collector, capturing all the telemetry information. And from there, the power, I would say, is finding the data that you're looking for using those queries. It's based on custom query language, an Azure Log Analytics specific query language. But if you're a bit familiar with traditional T-SQL, it shouldn't be too scary to start using it. Now, log analytics is the data collector. So you could say it's like capturing all information. You could use it as a big data query engine, and on top of that, obviously running your queries. So behind the scenes, what Application Insights is doing is actually giving you access to a whole bunch of pre-built queries for specific Azure services, and obviously you can customize all that as well. Now the next step is like, how does it actually work? Now I already explained you the look and feel. I showed you the custom or non-custom dashboards, but obviously there is a little step before, which means you need to get Application Insights into your application. So how does it work? Imagine you have a web app running Azure App Services or functions. You deploy your workload into Azure, and from there you're going to start thinking about, oh my god, I need some monitoring engine. For app services, for functions, you don't need to install anything. You go into the app service, you right click, sort of speak, and you're going to enable Application Insights. It's going to allow you to hook it up to an existing App Insights workspace or creating a dedicated one. Once it starts capturing information, you just click on the View Application Insights data, and that's pretty much it. If your application again is running outside of Azure, you can do the same, but you need to install an agent to do that. So summarizing it a little bit, what we have is our topology here, where we have web pages, like our web applications, right? We have a web service, and we have dependency calls. SQL, in my example before, it was REST API calls to Cognitive Service and Cosmos Database. It could be Azure Running Services, could be just traditional REST API calls to external hosted environments, and your Application Insights becomes your nerve center. And from there again, we have the active, proactive, reactive alerts, reporting, business dashboarding, you could say, in Power BI, and I'll show you a little bit later on how you could directly integrate it as part of your build process in Visual Studio. Because that's the other thing, right, where what I showed you is my application is running, but should I monitor it during runtime? Should I monitor it even before using build time? Maybe I'm building my app, I want to test my performance, I want to test my availability, I want to test the overall functionality of my app, I want to get a view on the full cycle from one function to the other in between event grid, interacting with storage with Cosmos Database or any other service. So the nice thing is that you can just develop your app for pretty much any possible language, I would say, injecting a JavaScript-based agent for applications, and I'll show you in a quick demo how you can do that. So there's no need to rebuild, to reinstall, to recompile your app. You're just going to inject the SDK, the Application Insight package. Like in my example, I'll show you the NuGet package, starting from a baseline web application and just injecting it. So instead of just having it running during the runtime when your application is already running in Azure or somewhere else in production, you can now integrate it in a build compile state. I got one example that I'll show you in Visual Studio, but it doesn't need to be like that specific. Again, if you use the SDK approach, you probably can get all that information even outside of Visual Studio. So with that, let's switch to another little demo where I'm going to spin up my Visual Studio. And I'll bring it to the screen here. So I got a basic next, finish web application, nothing fancy, nothing special. And just to validate that it's working, I'm going to spin it up. It's going to run the build process. Running test compile. We're now up here. You can already see that there is this offer, you could say, to start integrating application insights. So my browser is presenting the app, it's all working fine, so pretty good to go. Now from here, it's not really showing me a lot, because again, my app is not doing a lot, but it's showing me quite some information. Now this here is, for now at least, not integrated in my application. So it's just Visual Studio behavior, where I could look into specific timelines, but my app just ran for like a second, so nothing, not too much is available for it. Now let's make this a little bit more application insights ready, not just the Visual Studio experience. Where now we can add our component. We're going to right click, we're going to add a connected service. Why? Because now we want to move it into an application insight running no longer local, but that would still be an option to inject the SDK or directly connecting to Azure Application Insights. So I'm going to select Azure Application Insights, and it's going to look into my subscription and allowing me to integrate with one of my scenarios. I could create a dedicated one for my application, or again, I could centralize monitoring for multiple applications in the same application insights backend. So I'm going to select one that I already have, and it's going to allow me to create a connection string, what we call the instrumentation key. It's like some sort of a unique key for my application insights, and I would say treat it as a secret, similar to passwords and any other connection strings you could think of. From here, but that's just Visual Studio behavior, it's going to inject the little piece of code. It's going to inject the NuGet package for .NET, and it's going to store that instrumentation key in my local secret file. And that's all it takes. So now if I start my app again, the build process is exactly the same. While it's running, I can show you that the package, my app loaded faster than I wanted to show you, but I'm not going to stop it. My app is still running, exact same experience as before. Well, now I go back to App Insights, and you can see without doing anything, it now starts capturing information. So it's going to show me the different standalone requests, where obviously, again, there's not too much going on, but you could filter based on all events, based on specific requests. If I go back to my app, and I click around a little bit, just to generate some traffic to my app, right? Let's do this multiple times, there we go. I can see that up here, if I would refresh, that eventually it's going to show me more information. So in the meantime, it moved up to like 57 different events. I could select an event, and then here on the site, it's going to show me more details. What happened, what is the statistic information. I can filter down here, and it's almost giving me, I would say, a subset of what I showed you before inside our application insights on the Azure side. Pretty cool stuff. Good. So just wrapping up here, I would say, before talking about one of the last capabilities, but I talked at the start, in the middle, up till now about capturing telemetry information. Now to give you some idea, and this list is not even complete, but telemetry information could be request rates, response times, like I showed you, a number of failures, like I showed you in the demo as well, any possible exceptions, which is typically something like a stacking call, and that's typically something your developer team should appreciate, to get We can look into user and session statistics, not just the backend, but also looking at the front end. Reading out performance counters from your underlying web server platform, whether it's running Windows or Linux, it's not all too important anymore. I don't have a demo based on Docker containers, but if you remember from the start that we do have container insights, yes, it's based on the same logic, using application insights to give you a view on Docker containers, or even injecting Docker in SDK application insight, SDK inside web applications running Docker. And then remember, it's about the diagnostics, it's about the tracing, the short term and the longer term. Now there's one last part that I didn't talk about yet, and that is the application map. Now the application map is a dynamic diagram view that's getting built up based on the nature of your application. So in my case, it's a collection of function calls together with event grid, interacting with storage, interacting with Cosmos database, and that's the view you're going to get out of the application. But now within the application map, it's not only going to show you like a pretty abstract overview of the topology of your app, but it's also going to show you again statistics, some feedback about potential issues, any failures, performance, and overall interaction across all the different services. So let's switch to yet another little demo in our environment, where I'm first going to close my Visual Studio because I don't really need it anymore. I go back to my App Insights. For now, I'm going to open up my application view. Now, this is all based on, again, live information. Remember, my car is generating traffic, right? I'm going to move some parts out of the way. Then we can zoom in a little bit. So I have 10 instances. These are function calls running in the backend and connecting to Cosmos database. I have a second part in my application that's connecting to a browser session, and here on the side I got yet a third function connecting to my storage and interacting with my web application and the OCR cognitive service as well. For any of these, it allows me to just move my mouse over it and I can pull up details. And this is again pretty close to what I showed you before, but I didn't really talk about an application map yet. So once I drill down here, it's again bringing me into this detailed view that I showed you before. I got more information about my application. It's all again based on log analytics, but the nice thing is that it's going to build up this application topology. I can see that over here there is some issue where now I want to filter, I want to get performance counters, and it's again showing me the high level details from what I had before. With that, I'm going to close out. Thank you for watching the recording. I hope to help you a little bit understanding more about what application insights and the broader Azure monitoring topic is about. Hopefully I see you in any of my other sessions.